Well, good afternoon, folks. Welcome back to Three's In. I had the opportunity to talk with my son this morning. We chat about every 3 or 4 days. He lives up in Ohio. I'm down here in North Carolina. So anyway, I called to check on him, see how things were going. He recently had shoulder surgery, so he's been off for about 4 weeks or so, and he just returned to work last Monday. And as we were chatting, he was telling me about a couple of personnel issues he had that cropped up during the month he was off. And it seems like there's one or two guys in his unit that gave him pause to wonder, how the hell did you get here? And as he was telling me about it, I had to chuckle because I had a few of those occasions to think that myself. One of them was at Northwest Airlines, which I'll share with you here. I was flying with this guy, nice guy, young guy, probably 39, 40 so, and we were taxiing in. We just landed in Detroit. Now, this was after 9/11, so we had a sterile cockpit, and the door was, we were all buttoned up, the door was closed and so forth. And we cleared the runway and we're taking the Great Circle route heading back to the terminal. And he looks over at me and he reached down, pulled his cell phone out of his briefcase, and he looked over at me and he says, "Say, sir," he says, "would you mind if I made a phone call?" And I just went, "Oh, good Lord, where do we get these guys?" And it's one of those questions that you're asking, you wonder, okay. So I looked over at him thinking to myself, we are in a sterile cockpit environment. That means no talking other than checklist items or safety of flight items or anything like that. And he knows that too, but he wanted to make this phone call. So the position I was in is we have a 30-minute cockpit voice recorder, a continuous loop. So that thing's going, and I kind of looked up at it, just shaking my head, knowing that, okay, now I'm under the gun, because if anything happens, a baggage cart comes into the airplane or a fuel truck grazes us or whatever, anything that happens, they're going to pull the tapes and listen to them. And so I looked over at him and I said, "Okay," I said, "I get it now." And he said, "Pardon me?" And I said, "You are really from standardizations that gives the check rides. And you've been giving me a no-notice check ride these last 4 days, right?" I said, "Because nobody could ask that stupid of a question, knowing full well what the rules are with respect to, oh, good Lord. Excuse me, that clock hasn't worked for 3 months." Anyway, so I said to him, back to the story, I said to him, nobody could be that stupid enough to ask that kind of a question without you being from Flight Standards here giving me a no-notice check ride, right? I said, "How am I doing?" He said, "No, sir." And I was just kind of zinging him a little bit. He said, "No, sir, I really..." Oh, never mind. So he looked at me, took that cell phone, threw it back in his briefcase. The thing about it was, he was dating this gal down in Florida. And this gal was, she was married to a guy that was 65 or 67 or so. And he'd met this gal in the gym. And she explained to him that about every 6 months, she would go to the gym and pick up a boy toy for a few months and then kind of drop them and move along. Well, it was his turn in the barrel, if you will, and he didn't want to be dropped. So he was trying to call her to hold everything together. So he shared that with me, and once we got into parking, I said, "What was so important about that call?" And then he shared the story. And then I thought, you know what? As much as I'd like to get off this airplane and go home, it's time for me to have a little bit of a come to Jesus meeting with this kid. I said, "You know what?" I said, "Now hearing the story, I have a further appreciation for what you're dealing with." And I said, when I think about all the women in Florida that there are down there running around, I said, you might want to hold on to this one. It sounds like she's a keeper. And again, I was being facetious, and he just kind of cocked his head and looked at me like, "Are you serious?" And I said, you know, there's no upside to this. It's not going to come out good. And I said, you've got a 9-year-old daughter to think about. I said, what kind of a role model are you for her? So we talked a little bit about it, and then shook hands and said good luck with it. And didn't see him again for about 7 months, maybe 9 months, and ran into each other in the hallway. And I forgot about the whole thing. He called me aside and said, hey, he said, I just wanted to thank you for talking to me. He said, not a lot of people these days care enough about people to talk to you. And he said, I really appreciate that little conversation we had. And I kind of looked at him, and he said, the cell phone. I said, yeah, oh yeah, I got it. He said, well, that really meant a lot to me. And you know what? Those are the kind of stories I like when they come back to me, knowing that perhaps I helped somebody out. Those are just heartwarming, and I appreciate them. So anyway, it's nice seeing everybody, and don't use a cell phone texting in. Okay, see ya.